whether it's type 1 or type 2, the major risk which we are concerned about is increased risk of severe hypoglycemia or hyperglycemia. So as you can see, the figures, the bar showing that when you fast, you almost have a more than 4 to 5 times increased risk of hypoglycemia in type 1 diabetic more so, and similarly almost more than 7 times increased risk of hypoglycemia in type 2 diabetics. So that's the reason that we are concerned about that is it safe for our patients to fast or not to fast. Apart from hyperglycemia and hypoglycemia, there are other risks involved, particularly in our part of the world where there is a lot of, say, summer, particularly these days, and you fast for about maybe 12 to 14 or 16 hours, and you don't take water, and the risk of dehydration and thrombosis, and this thrombosis can involve any vascular bed, maybe coronaries, maybe predisposed to stroke and many other things. And then again, more so in the type 1, but in not limited to type 1, it can be diabetic ketoacidosis can be another risk associated with this fasting. The thing which we have to look at it before we ask our patient, or our patient wants to fast, we have to quantify risk, that what are the risks involved if we fast. And the risks are dependent upon both what is the type of diabetes, type 1 or type 2, what medication patient is on, is an oral hypoglycemic agents, or isn't just maintained on diet and maybe on lifestyle modification. What are chances of this person's having a risk of hypoglycemia? There are certain, say, comorbid involved, which can increase the risk of this hypoglycemia as well. Similarly, there are social circumstances. What type of job person is doing? A person who is a laborer, a manual worker, and he has to work in maybe physically active say work, he has more chances of developing hypoglycemia, more chances of developing dehydration as a result of that. And similarly, many of our patients who come to fast, ask for fasting, they might have had or they fast in the previous year. And during that year, we can ask them that whether they experienced any hypoglycemia or any complication. And taking into account all these, then we can probably stratify these risk factors. And based on that, we usually classify our patients into 3 categories. This is category 1, which is we have placed in red, which have any one of the following. That if he had severe hypoglycemia in previous 3 months, or had an episode of diabetic ketoacidosis in 3 months, or any hyperosmolar hyperglycemic states like HONC or marked, say, hyperglycemia. Similarly, those who have a history of recurrent hypoglycemia or hyperglycemia, or particularly hypoglycemia unawareness, patient with diabetic autonomic neuropathy, who if developed hypoglycemia may not have any, say, warning signs, and may, say, pass off without any warning. So these are the one which probably are high-risk patients. Poorly controlled type 1 diabetics are high-risk patients. Someone who is already having some acute illness or recently in convalescent phase and is, say, having infection should not be. Similarly, pregnant ladies who, whether they have a pre-existing diabetes or whether they develop gestational diabetes and they are on insulin, they should be considered as high risk. Patient on kidney disease stage 4 and 5, they are high risk patients. Similarly, with advanced macrovascular complication or recent stroke or recent MI, they would be again in that category. Very old patient and very sick patient, they should not be. And similarly, patient who have a cognitive impairment, who probably are not aware of when to eat, when not to eat, or they may have, say, very prominent dementia, they are in this category. Our second category is the one which have a little bit of well-controlled diabetes mellitus. They are on maybe on medication, oral, or maybe mixed dose, say, insulins or multi-dose insulins. Those with the, say, sustained poor glycemic control, type 2 diabetics, gestational diabetes, pregnant ladies who are controlled on diet alone, not on medication. CKD in stage 3 or early nephrotic or just proteinuria, maybe in this category. They have macrovascular disease, but they are stable on medication. They had an MI maybe 6 or 7 years ago, or a stroke 10 years ago. Patients with the comorbids, with some additional risk factors. Similarly, patient, as I mentioned, who are intense physical activity, and then the patient on drug which may affect to cognition to some extent. So these patients come into category 2. Now, the category 3 is very well controlled diabetic, and by that we mean their HbA1c in previous, say, 1 to 3 months has been between 6.5 to 7.5. Their blood sugar fasting is running in the range of 100 over 130. Their blood sugar random is between 140 to 180, or on certain monitoring in previous last 1 or 2 months. And they may be being treated on any one of the following. They may be maybe just on lifestyle therapy, or maybe on oral hypoglycemic agents of all the categories, maybe on incretin-based therapies like DPP-4 or GLP, SGLT2 inhibitors, another category, and then they may be on basal insulins, not multi-dose insulin or 3 or 4 times insulin, right? Now, the category 1 patients must not fast. That's just they should be told that they should not be fast, because that put them in a very high risk of having say missed fasting. Category 2 patients should not fast, but they can be managed with a little bit of titration of their medications and adjustment of their dosage, and counseling them about it. But as we know, most of our patients, they are very, say, more of a religious mind, and they still, despite doctor's advice, choose to fast. They should be probably counseled, but of course their religious belief and faith has to be respected, and then they should be very clearly told about risks associated with the fasting. The category 2 patients, as we said, they can fast. They should receive structured education prior to, say, fasting. They should be followed by, say, qualified diabetic team. They should be encouraged to check their blood sugar more frequently. They have to be explained that the roza does not gaza or tootta nahi hai. They have to consult their physician for adjustment of their dosage of their diet, for which I think Aziz would be talking about that, and then Zaman would be telling us about the diet as well. They should be also told that they should be prepared to break the fast in case they have symptoms of hypo or hyperglycemia, and they should be prepared to stop the fast in case there is a frequent hypo or hypoglycemia related to that. The category patients can fast with the help of, say, medical advice, because these are the ones which had a very well controlled diabetic, ranging A1C ranging between 6.5 to 7.5, blood sugar fasting between 100 to 130, and random between 142. And there are no recent episodes of hypoglycemia or hyperglycemia in previous 3 to 4 months, 2 to 3 months. And there again, doses needs to be adjusted according to the duration of the fast and according to the dietary pattern they follow, what they take in the sahar and what they take in the iftar, the amount, and that all dependent upon that. Now, as I said, this fasting in diabetic can be challenging. Each individual is different. You have to, say, titrate tailor-made as therapy, and you have to probably explain the risk to them. Particularly, they should be aware of, say, hypoglycemia and their symptoms, and they should preferably wearing a bracelet with mention that they are diabetic on medication, right? We have described certain categories which should be counseled not to fast. So that's what I have to say. I think I've spent my 10 minutes, and I pass it on to Dr. Somia for next speaker to join us.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Tariq Wasim. I think it was very crisp and very clear that we have three categories: red, yellow, and green, and you can very well place
Yeah.
yourself if you are a diabetic in which category you fall, and then decide whether you can fast safely during month of Ramadan. Thank you very much, sir. The next
Right.
speaker that we have today is a very esteemed speaker. He is the chair for diabetes for Pakistan Society of Internal Medicine. We have very successfully conducted two seminars on diabetes prior to this. One was in Karachi and another one was in Multan. I would like to request Professor Zaman Sheikh to take over the mic from me and elaborate about what are the different dietary modifications that we need to practice during the month of Ramadan.
Bismillah ar-Rahman Rahim. Thank you very much, Dr. Somia Iqtidar, Professor Javed Akram, and my respected, dear, all the speakers and panelists. My topic is very long, but inshallah, I will finish in coming 10 minutes. It's about what to eat during Ramadan for diabetic patients. And besides Pakistan studies, I will quote two international organization recommendations.
यार
One
अपने
is
तमाम लोगों
IDF.
को लॉग आउट करवाओ.
Sorry, it is IDF DAR 2018 guideline still valid. Other is latest ITF EST 2020 latest guideline. I will take some references and guidance from these two international organizations. They are not foreign guideline for us because they are based on research, and many research is from Pakistan as well. So they included Pakistani research as well. So this is international. And you see IDF is associated with both DAR, diabetic and Ramadan and EST, but it is for all Muslim countries, including Pakistan. So let us begin with iftar. Traditionally, we take date along with one drink. So let us see what is fact about dates and drink. Like exercise, that exercise will be 20 minutes, 30 minutes. We are very particular about dates, khajur. But it is sunnah. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we can take, we should take actually. But actually, date is a compact form of energy, and 100 gram of dates means roughly 10 average dates. They are full in calories. About 300 calories are there in 10 dates. We take about 3, 5, 6 dates is usually, but in diabetes, maximum 3. According to IDF dark, maximum 2, but EST said up to 3 you can take. Why? Actually, that is full of energy. It contains so many trace elements, including copper, zinc, antioxidant, iron, phosphorus, copper, and so many vitamins as well. Vitamin A, B complex, whole B complex, C, then not D, but E. It is full of vitamins and mineral. But unfortunately, it contains 70 gram. I'm talking about 100 out of 100 grams, 70 gram is sugar, and it is in most commonly free sugar type. In GI index, in some the khajurs are dates are they are different. Some are small, some are large, some are very juicy, some are dry. I'm talking about average date. So glycemic index is quite high in some dates, like 100. So we are careful. So maximum 3, but it is better to not exceed 2 dates at the time of iftar. Now let us talk about drink. After 12, 16, 14 hours fasting, we need some drink, hydration. What to take? Ideal drink is water, but obviously we cannot deprive some other tasty drinks for diabetic. So other drinks which are healthy for diabetic, less harmful, but rather beneficial are: number one, low fat milk, plus lassi, diluted lassi, based drink, then some lemonade, Now, lemon water. Normally we discourage artificial sweeteners, like so many trade names are there. But non-caloric, good quality sweetener can be taken 4 to 6 tablets in 24 hours. They are okay. So we can take lemon water in with some artificial sweetener in it. It is very tasty, and we can have it. Then if you are more interested in some more tasty thing, then we can do this thing, that 50% pure homemade fruit juice in sprinkling water. There are two types of water available in market. One is still, other is sprinkle. So if we mix of fruit juice homemade 50% with water, it is like soft drink. So you can enjoy soft drink. So it is a good drink for diabetic. Then we divide our calories in three times. 50% 50% total calorie at the time of sahar, 40% at the time of iftar, and 10% is a snack. Now, snack is iftar. Actually, we take maximum calorie. We know what we eat at the time of iftar, we Pakistani people. So we should limit 10% at the time of iftar, then main meal 40, and then 50% at the time of suhoor. Take suhoor as late as possible. It is sunnah as well, and to prevent hypoglycemia, this is essential for a diabetic patient to take suhoor as late as possible. Now we should take more protein and more fat at the time of sahar, and more carbohydrate, because after 12 hours fasting we need some carbohydrate for refreshing our energy. So more carbohydrate at the time of iftar and more protein and fat. Those who are fond of paratha, best time to take paratha for diabetic person is at the time of sahar. But it is not commercial supermarket paratha, because it is rich in fat, saturated fat. If you put tissue paper on paratha, which is available in supermarket, literally you can squeeze oil afterwards. It is so rich in oil and saturated fat. So homemade paratha with either olive oil or canola oil, very light oil. So it is a good news. One can enjoy paratha, diabetic person, at the time of sahar, along with more protein. Then 10% snack we can take obviously between iftar and sahar. Now IDF DAR recommended that 40% should be carbohydrate, 30% should be protein, and 30% should be fat. But it is for every person. One can modify according to situation. If one is very fat, then less fat. If one has got kidney problem, cardiac failure, then less protein, and so on. It is time of COVID nowadays. So if there is no kidney problem, no hypoxic state, COPD or cardiac failure, then nowadays we should take more protein to boost up our energy. Now let us talk about fat. Which type of fat we should take? It is we always curse fast foods, pizza, burger, but believe me, these desi fast foods like samosa, pakora, full of beef, they are not less harmful. We blame fast food, foreign, Western, but our desi food is not less harmful. But rather, I am more concerned about our desi food, because those expensive fast food, they must have, I believe, good quality of oil, good quality of meat, and those footpath items which we take at the time of very cheap item at the time of iftar in Pakistan, they contain, we don't know what they contain, what type of oil, what type of keema, what type of minced meat, we don't know. So we should avoid both desi fast food as well as so-called pizza and burger. Now, so we should avoid saturated fat like fast food, all the bakery items, because they contain saturated fat, large, and more salt, more free sugar, refined atta. Then cheese, full cream cheese, like pizza. In pizza they put full cream milk, we should avoid it as well. Then buttercream, obviously, we should avoid. We should take lean protein. What do you mean by lean protein? Lean protein is skinless chicken. Skinless, not broast. Broast contain skin, and under skin 15% is cholesterol. So, skinless chicken, fish, even egg white, it is best lean protein. If your cholesterol is controlled, please take full egg daily, no problem. Because egg yolk also contain HDL, which is good cholesterol. So if your cholesterol is controlled, please you can take one full egg, otherwise egg white, which is best lean meat. Then low-fat cheese is good. Lentils, they also contain lean protein. And then some peanut butter. This is also good. Now, last one point, ITF DAR. It suggested one plate known as Ramadan plate. They kept the name Ramadan plate. This is interesting. And many of them, they are Muslims. Muslims, they made these guidelines. Now, this means what is Ramadan plate? It contains 800 calories and 1 cup of vegetable, starchy or non-starchy, both we can take, and whole grain rice, 1.5 cup, whole grain. Unfortunately, we take refined rice. Whole grain rice is better because they contain antioxidant, they contain fiber, they contain vitamins, they contain antioxidant. Or if you want to take chapati, then chapati with choker. Choker, I mean with fiber. One you can take one chapati instead of 1.5 boiled rice. Then
Sir,
lentil.
please repeat this.
Okay.
Sir, please repeat this.
Last sentence. Lentils half and fruit 1 serving. 1 serving means 1 cup. Then protein, it suggested 120 gram. 120 gram means half this. Very less protein. So if your kidney is okay, then you can take about 250 gram of protein. That's all. Thank you very much.
Dr. Zaman, please continue.
No, I finished actually. I thought I was over the time.
Okay, thank you very much.
Completed all the points. If there is question, I'm ready to reply. Thank you very much, Somia.
Okay. Pooja, you had a question. If you can please post it in the group chat, I will ask in the end. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. We will now move on to our third speaker for today. Our third speaker is an excellent orator, and he simplifies things for you. And I'm very honored to invite Professor Azizur Rahman to take on and tell us about optimization of anti-diabetic medication during Ramadan. Professor Azizur Rahman, Senior Vice President, PSIM.
Thank you, Somia, for very kind words. Let me first admit that my presentation is based on what I say, medical common sense. And I just came up with these recommendations, and I would be very, very receptive to have any opinion from anybody which is contrary to mine. But I believe generally what I'm going to say is in line with recommendations of EASD and ADA. How do I? My presentation is not moving. Okay. So I think broadly speaking, we can classify anti-diabetic drugs into 3 categories. Those who have very hypoglycemia, and those who carry moderate risk of hypoglycemia, and those who carry very high risk of hypoglycemia. Let's see this one. Metformin, our old love, very, very low risk of hypoglycemia, except that people who has kidney disease, obviously we don't prescribe this to them, but DPP-4 inhibitors, SGLT2 inhibitors, GLP receptor agonist, and thiazolidinediones, all these drugs, they have very low potential of causing hypoglycemia. Generally speaking, when somebody is taking these medicine in combination with some other, then there may be possibility of hypoglycemia, but these drugs in themselves usually do not cause hypoglycemia. This word other means there are some other anti-diabetic agent, but I have not included them because they're not available in our country. Then moderate risk of hypoglycemia, newer generation sulfonylureas, glimepiride and glyclazide modified release. So they are more or less like basal sulfonylureas. They do not cause too much of hypoglycemia, but a moderate risk is there. Then basal insulin, the insulins which are truly basals, like glargine or degludec, and then basal insulin with even GLP receptor agonist combo. I have included this because this preparation is not available in Pakistan. So maybe some people are using. So I think I would also include this combination in moderate risk. Then those agents which are associated with high risk of hypoglycemia, older generation sulfonylureas, older than glibenclamide are not available these days, but glibenclamide is a very potent hypoglycemic agent, and it has got very long half-life. Somebody who's taking twice a day is at a very high risk of developing hypoglycemia. Particularly, it's very common because it's very cheap. Then acting insulin with peak effect, and I'm actually mentioning about NPH, especially if it is injected in the morning. And pre-mixed insulin with, even if they are combined with regular insulin or fast acting, their NPH component can cause hypoglycemia in the daytime. So my recommendations are based basically on lowering the risk of hypoglycemia. Although, as Professor Tariq was mentioned, there are other risks also. So, but I'm going to basically focus how to minimize the risk of hypoglycemia with Ramazan. Metformin therapy, if somebody is taking up to 1 gram twice daily, or Metformin XR formulation 1 gram once or twice a day, no change in medication is necessary. He can just start fasting without any modification in his medication, and he can just continue, and there will be no risk of hypoglycemia. Then DPP-4 monotherapy. There are people who are taking monotherapy patients, DPP-4 with metformin. So sitting 100 milligram once a day or 50 milligram twice a day is absolutely possible. And vildagliptin 50 milligram BD, I think again, no change in treatment is necessary. Patient can just start doing fasting. And third, the very common and very popular combination, metformin with DPP-4 combos. And if somebody is taking sitagliptin 100 milligram with metformin 1 XR formulation, or sitagliptin milligram with metformin up to 1 gram BD, or somebody is taking vildagliptin 50 milligram and metformin up to 1 gram BD. So all these, they again may not make any changes in the treatment. So basically, metformin alone or metformin along with DPP-4 inhibitors, no treatment change is needed. Now, SGLT2 inhibitors, these are relatively new drugs. I think they're very popular, and there are very people who are taking SGLT2 therapy as monotherapy, but if somebody is taking dapagliflozin up to 10 milligram OD and empagliflozin up to 25 milligram OD, I suggest that some dosage should be reduced, maybe switch to nighttime, after time, or dose reduction if significant diuresis. In my personal experience, the effect of diuresis is very, very variable. Patients who have hardly noticed any effect on their urination, the others, they complain of too much diuresis. So I think based on the individual, there may be some in the treatment dosage, maybe can reduce to half and maybe give it at iftari rather than at set. SGLT2 inhibitors and metformin combinations, dapagliflozin 5 milligram, metformin up to 1 gram BD, empagliflozin up to 12.5 milligram, and metformin up to 1 gram BD, and they can be continued as such, or morning dose may be dropped or reduced. I think it is very important if a patient sees his physician before the Ramadan and counseling is done, but these days patients are quite educated and they can be instructed maybe on telephone. Sulfonylureas, these are the main drugs which can cause hypoglycemia. Older generations like glibenclamide as monotherapy or in combination with metformin, in my personal opinion, should be avoided during Ramadan, and especially if it is BD dose. And newer generation sulfonylureas as monotherapy or in combination with metformin can be taken once daily, preferably at iftar. If somebody was taking BD dose before Ramadan, I think then one general recommendation is that the evening, normally we give a bigger dose in the morning, at evening dose at night, half dose at night. So if somebody is taking BD, morning dose may be reduced to half. Sulfonylureas, it is recommended that sugar be checked in the afternoon or whenever the symptom of hypoglycemia. I think sulfonylurea is one, cannot be 100% sure that there will be no hypoglycemia, even if somebody is taking modified release, modern generation. I think one has to be very vigilant about hypoglycemia. If there are any symptoms or even otherwise, I think late afternoon, one should check his sugar. So I recommend if sugar is more than 130 in the like 4-ish, 3-ish, then same dose may be continued. If you patient continue the same dose in remaining Ramadan, I think the hypoglycemia is very minimal. And if it is 100 to 130, I think some dose reduction may be considered, and 10%, not reduced by several 10%, but maybe 1/4. And if somebody's sugar is less than 70, then I think at that time it is recommended, especially if the patient had symptoms, the fast should be broken and onward at least 25% reduction in the dosage should be done. GLP-1 receptor agonist, liraglutide up to 1.8 milligram OD, dulaglutide 1.5 milligram once a week. I think again, no treatment should be, no change in therapy. Liraglutide combo may be continued, and 10% dose reduction if pre-Ramadan blood sugar fasting was around 120. I think that is my own recommendation based on common sense. If pre-Ramadan it was 120 or less, then during Ramadan it can drop to 70, 80. So I think maybe reduction in this combo is that's right. Pre-mixed insulins, very popular in Pakistan, like 70-30 or this 30 insulin. Usual morning dose can be taken at iftar, and half of evening dose may be injected at Sahri. This is a very common recommendation, and many people, they easily understand it. I think is very practical. But those patients who are at high risk of hypoglycemia, based on past history, somebody has experienced hypoglycemia on the same medication in the past, or somebody who has borderline nephropathy, I think NPH mono or all NPH containing combos should not be taken, at least at Sahri. Basal insulin, glargine U100, glargine U300, degludec or degludec with aspart, no changes that needed because they're truly basal insulin. So I'm coming to the summary. I hope I'm not taking too much time. In summary, medicine with the high potential of hypoglycemia should be avoided during Ramadan because the main risk of hypoglycemia. And agents with moderate potential of hypoglycemia may be taken at iftar or may be taken at half dose. Medicine with low potential of hypoglycemia can be continued as such, like metformin, DPP-4 inhibitors, or adjustment will still be needed, as every human is different, and that's developing hypoglycemic symptoms with does not cause, but sometimes I've seen people developing hypoglycemic symptom. So I think in every patient, it has to be individualized. And pre-Ramadan counseling and appropriate adjustment in medication is highly recommended. Thank you very much. Over to you, Soumya.
Thank you very much, sir. I think, as I told you in the beginning, he just has the magic to simplify things for you, and very crisp knowledge and very clear knowledge so that you can all use it in your medical practice. Thank you very much, sir. The last speaker for today, I would like to invite Professor Taj Jamshed. Professor Taj Jamshed will be talking about what are the complications that you can come across in diabetic patients if they fast during Ramadan. So over to you, Professor Taj Jamshed.
मैंने आपको अनम्यूट कर दिया है डॉक्टर ताज जमशेद। आपकी आवाज अभी नहीं आ रही, आप काइंडली माइक के पास आ जाइएगा। मैंने अनम्यूट कर दिया है आपको। डॉक्टर ताज, आपकी आवाज नहीं आ रही है।
आप ठीक है?
यस, अब आपकी आवाज आ रही है।
जी, बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम। Thank you very much, Dr. Sumaya, for the introduction, and I would always feel privileged and honored to be part of the team PSIM, and especially under the inspirational patronship of Professor Javed Akram. We are always trying to be going ahead under his patronship. So I will start with without delay, I will start my presentation, and thanks to Formio also for inviting us.
You're welcome, sir.
I will share the screen. Yeah. And already too much has been talked about the diabetes in Ramadan, and there are about 1.57 billion Muslims. They are living all over the world, which is about 23% of the world population, and this is growing 3% every year. And Ramadan being considered one of the 5 pillars of Islam, and in this holy month, the month when the Quran was revealed to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and it is said in Surah Baqarah, ayah 185, that whoever witnessed the month of Ramadan, then he or she should fast. But if any of you is ill or traveling, then he or she is exempted from fasting, and the missed fast should be completed at another time. So actually from this ayah we can get the idea there are some situations where the people can be exempted, and fasting during Ramadan is a duty for all the healthy adult Muslims. But the point is, there are the people who are exempted, like the children, the sick people, the travelers, and the women during menses, and anyone with a reduced mental capacity, they are exempted. But there are quite a few challenges, not for the patient, but also being the healthcare professionals for us also. And Ramadan marks a sudden shift in the meal times and the sleep pattern and the wakefulness pattern and the consumption of the food, the drink, the medication. They are all prohibited from suhoor to iftar. And many patients with diabetes, they insist on fasting during Ramadan. This is a common situation we come across in our clinical setups here, that despite their high risk and the risk categories, if we ask the patient that you cannot do the fasting, this will be very risky for you people, but they again insist for the fasting. But anyhow, this is our duty. We should be looking into this, and we should be explaining to the patient, and then obviously we must pray, and the patient should also be considering this what we are telling to them. And obviously if the patient is insisting on fasting, this creates a real medical challenge for themselves and also for the healthcare providers. There is a CREED study, which is a multi-country retrospective observational study of the management and the outcomes of the people with type 2 diabetes during Ramadan. It indicates that many people who are at very high risk of adverse events still fast during Ramadan, despite the ADA recommendation that those at high risk should avoid the prolonged fasting. So even the studies are also showing the same facts. So it is very important that the medical professionals be aware of the potential risks which is associated with the fasting during Ramadan and with the approaches to mitigate those risk factors. So what are the risks which were associated with the fasting people? I think already Professor Tariq has talked about this one, but I will briefly go through this. And we know this diabetes is a metabolic disorder. And during Ramadan, because of the major changes in our regular diet, the fluid intake, the physical activity, the medication schedule, these all can disturb the metabolic activities and thus can lead to the so many complications. And there is increased risk for these complications can be there. And the complications, as already I think on hypoglycemia, the hyperglycemia, the diabetic ketoacidosis, dehydration and thrombosis, these complications can occur in these patients. And although the hypoglycemia and the hyperglycemia affect the people with diabetes on a daily basis, but the fasting during that time, this may increase the risk of these events even more in these patients. There are 2-3 studies, I'll just go through briefly. The epidemiological study in Ramadan, and this has shown that there is high rates of severe hypoglycemia and hyperglycemia during Ramadan compared with before the Ramadan. And the number of hyperglycemic events episodes was also significantly higher during Ramadan in the diabetics. Another study which has shown, CREED study, that at least one episode of hypoglycemia during Ramadan was reported by 8.8% of the individuals with type 2 compared with 5.4% before Ramadan. So the episodes of hypoglycemia, these are more common. And about more than 47% of the hypoglycemic episodes, they need for the patients to break the fast even. So this is especially the complications if related the hypoglycemia, these are very important to look for and to look for the reasons in these patients. And the risk of hypoglycemia was higher during Ramadan fasting if had episodes of severe hypoglycemia within the 3 months prior to Ramadan. So when to break the fast is simplified. We can say that when the patient who is fasting, his blood sugar has gone below 70 milligram per deciliter, this is the time the patient should break fast. He should not be waiting for anything, and he should break the fast. And obviously this is all related to the daily blood glucose monitoring and the symptomatology of the hypoglycemia. So patient must be educated at what are the symptoms of hypoglycemia, and he or she should check the blood sugar if they have the symptoms. And similarly, if the blood glucose is more than 300 milligram per deciliter, so these patients should break their fast. But here, if the patient is otherwise having not much symptoms and patient is otherwise comfortable, so individualized care can be opted here, and patient can wait for to break the fast here. And if the patient is having symptoms of hypoglycemia, the hyperglycemia, the dehydration, or acute illness, if these occur, so these are the patients who should be breaking the fast. So hypoglycemic symptom, very important to tell to the patients that if they start trembling, having more sweating, chilly, and they have the palpitation, hunger, altered mental status, confusion, or headache. So these are the symptoms. The patient has these symptoms, so they should always consider that the blood sugar is going down and they should break fast. Similarly, hyperglycemia, the patient feels more thirsty, the hunger is there, frequent urination, fatigue, confusion, and sometimes the patient start having the nausea and the vomiting and abdominal pain. So if the hyperglycemia goes on further, so this may lead to at times, especially in type 1 diabetic patients, the patient may go into diabetic ketoacidosis. Type 2, they have the propensity also for this ketoacidosis. So this is always, and the diabetic ketoacidosis risk is always increased, particularly if the blood sugar is already poorly controlled prior to the start of the Ramadan. And the risk further increases due to the excessive reduction. Sometimes the people say that we are doing the fasting and we have reduced the intake of food, so we should reduce the insulin. They reduce more insulin rather than their foods. So this mismatch or misbalance, this also leads to the more of the hyperglycemia and may result in the development of the ketoacidosis. Dehydration and thrombosis, obviously there is limitation of fluid intake during the Ramadan and fasting time, and especially if you see the fasting time is 14 to 15 hours here with the hot summer season, so there are always chances that the patient may develop dehydration. Similarly, the hyperglycemia, it also produces the osmotic diuresis, and this also further contribute to the volume and the electrolyte depletion. Then hot weather, and the people, especially the people who are working outside in the hot climate, they are having the more chances of developing the dehydration. And similarly, there are some reports that there is increased incidence of retinal vein occlusion in these patients if the dehydration is more marked. But studies have shown that the coronary event or the strokes were not increased during Ramadan despite this dehydration. So this will be there. So at the end, these patients, they must be having the individualized management plan to minimize the risk of hypoglycemia, hyperglycemia, decay, and obviously dehydration and thrombosis. So what should be there, that the patient must be attending the pre-Ramadan clinics for the proper assessment, so that they, for the Ramadan, they should be educated properly. And they must be educated to do the self-monitoring of the blood glucose at home, so that at least according to the IDF, they are saying that at least 6 times should be checked. But anyhow, according to the situation, that can be changed. But the self-monitoring of blood glucose is always advised to the patients. And then the diet and nutritional advice, dividing the amount of food calories between the sahur and iftar, and plus 1 or 2 snacks if necessary. Then obviously the diet must be including the low glycemic index foods, high fiber foods, and that releases the energy very slowly. And the patients in their diet, they must be taking plenty of vegetables and salads. And similarly, minimize the food with the high saturated fats, and avoid the sugary desserts and the juices like the ruh afza and the other juices, they should be avoided. So any foods which relate to the very rapid rise in the blood sugar, these should be avoided. And the patient, they must be keeping themselves well hydrated during iftar, from the iftar to suhoor time. At frequent times, they must be taking more of the waters to keep themselves well hydrated. And they must be avoiding the excessive exercise, and their exercise should not be especially during the time when they are fasting. They can do the exercise mild to moderate, but nowadays it is considered that even the Tarawih, full Tarawih, if we are doing that and we are offering Tarawih, this exercise is sufficient for during the Ramadan time. And then drugs adjustment, as already discussed, should be told to the patient, should be according to their blood sugar controls. And especially the drugs to mention, the sulfonylurea drugs and the drugs like the SGLT2 inhibitors, because these drugs can lead to glycemia, especially the sulfonylurea and the SGLT2 inhibitors. If they are taken, especially in the morning, in the hot summer season, they may lead to more of fluid loss from the body. So this may lead to dehydration. So this should be taken very carefully. And then patient must be educated about the breaking fast as soon as the complication or any new harmful condition occurs, and the immediate medical help for diabetics who need medical help quickly rather than waiting for the medical assistance next day. So they should be told that whenever they have any problem or complication related to the diabetes, they must be asking the help from the healthcare provider as early as possible. And at the end, this actually all the talk was taken from as a reference from the International Diabetes Federation and Diabetes in Ramadan International Alliance DAR studies, right? So thank you very much, and be blessed always. Have a safe and healthy life. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Tajim Sheikh.
Professor Tajim Sheikh. With this, we come to the end of the presentations, but now we are going to have a question and answer session, and I will invite some questions from our panelists. So there are a few set of questions that I have from the group chat, and I would like to request my panelists to answer one by one. The first question is from Andaleeb Kazi. She wants to ask that if a person has taken prednisolone for 14 days, can they fast? I would request Professor Sajid Abedullah if he can kindly reply.
So I have unmuted you. Yes, you can speak now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
What dose the patient took, Soumya? What dose the patient took of prednisolone?
Nahi kiya. Andali, what is the? I think 3 days the short duration of prednisolone course. I am assuming that.
If there is no other comorbid condition and patient was already non-diabetic and was taking anti-diabetic treatment whatsoever it was on regular basis, I don't think so that low dose prednisolone is a contraindication to keeping fast, and probably a mild dose adjustment may be required in those in which you are taking moderate dose of prednisolone. I don't think there should be any contraindication in keeping fast with 14 days duration of prednisolone.
Okay.
Over to Dr. Soumya.
Thank you, sir. Sir, if you would like to say something about our presentations today.
It was always wonderful to listen to all these legends. Professor Azizur Rahman, he's my teacher as well, and when he speaks, nobody has any option else than that to just calm down and listen to what he's saying. It was a wonderful presentation from his side. Dr. Tariq Wasim,
I'm humbled.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Dr. Tariq Wasim, he spoke very well on the who should fast and who should not be keeping fast. In our population, but I always know whatsoever the patient is having, whatsoever complication the patient is having, chahe the patient is in high risk group or is moderate risk group or in low risk group, nobody wants that they should not be keeping fast. And I wonder कि हम लोगों ने यहाँ पे अभी बात कर रहे थे कि more than 300 milligram per deciliter पे रोजा तोड़ दें. हमारे मेरे ख्याल है कि most of the population who is diabetic, in most of them they are having blood sugars of even more than that, and they very successfully keep fast and complete their 30-29 rosas. So I think there is some genetic background as well as we Pakistanis are concerned. इस दफा मेरे ख्याल सर एक जो चीज नहीं हो सकी, we always try to manage our patients pre-Ramadan, and this time due to COVID-19 issue, lot of patients they were devoid of getting their pre-Ramadan sessions, and they were not having the dosage adjustments, the diet adjustments, etc. The best part should have been कि जैसे हम लोग ईद की तैयारी करते हैं ना, तो उसी तरह हमें रमजान की तैयारी भी करनी चाहिए. रमजान में हम लोग घरों में बेसन और घी और हर चीज तो लाके रखते हैं और अनारदाना और चाट मसाला एटसेट्रा, लेकिन हमें उससे पहले रमजान की अपनी तैयारी भी करनी चाहिए, अपने डॉक्टर को मिलना चाहिए और उसके साथ साथ अपनी सारा वर्कअप, वी शुड बी हैविंग ऑल ऑफ देयर वर्कअप बीइंग डन and let them know कि उन्हें क्या कुछ करना है, which probably this time the patient have missed. Dr. Taj Jamshed, he spoke very well on his subject, and I think overall it was a wonderful experience and a great thing that we must continue this experience on regular basis till this COVID war is over. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I think it's a wonderful suggestion. और मेरा ख्याल है कि अगली दफा हम एक ऐसा सेशन करें जिसमें हम थोड़ी सी केस डिस्कशन करें about different scenarios of diabetes and how to manage them in Ramadan. I would now like to request Professor Munir Azhar. There are a few questions if he can take. One question is for Mr. Usman Ahmed. He wants to know, okay, is it okay to take insulin like Lentus or Novo in Seher? Or you think that the blood sugar level will not fall during fast till iftar by not having insulin? So if a person is taking insulin can he take at Seher? This is the question. Professor Munir.
Thank you very much. First of all, I really congratulate every participant that at least we are talking very nicely about current problem of this every person of Ramadan. And it has been nicely pointed out that we basically take the advantage कि हम कहते हैं हम रूहानी तौर पे इतने मजबूत हैं that we can carry it on and there is no problem if we'll go with the same dosage with everything and there is no need of meeting a doctor. I really endorse Dr. Sajid Abedullah, but he has pointed out कि जैसे ईद की तैयारी है वैसे रमजान की तैयारी है. बहुत अच्छी बात कही आपने. और मेरा अपना ख्याल भी ये है that things would have been settled very early, but definitely it was COVID. And now about the insulin. So preferably insulin because it works around the clock, so it's better to take at iftar. However, it can be taken in the sahar, but preferably at iftar. But I would request Dr. Zaman Sheikh as well that he should also come up with the this idea that what is his experience, because recommendation is that that can be given at iftar. Better it is. Dr. Zaman Sheikh.
Can you unmute Dr. Zaman?
Speaker is not on. Speaker. He is mute.
Zaman, can you unmute Dr. Zaman, please?
Now it's okay.
Yes,
Hello?
yes, we are listening, sir.
Hello?
Sir, we are listening,
Is it
sir.
okay now?
आपकी आवाज आ
Sir,
रही
we
है.
can hear you.
Hello? Can you repeat your question, please?
Dr. Somia, please repeat the question.
Sir, question ये था कि is it okay not to take insulin in Seher, thinking that during the fast till iftar you will not be needing insulin? So what is your stand?
Very important question. Okay, there is no one answer to that. It depends upon how much is your sugar and how much insulin are you taking before Ramadan. If you're taking pre-mixed insulin like 70-30 type, then you have to take higher dose at the iftar and 50% of the other dose at the time of Sahar, 50% less, and then be ready to adjust the dose. And if you are taking basal insulin only once a day, you can take. It is better. I think Professor Aziz Rahman mentioned it. At the time of iftar, you take basal insulin, so that most of the time coverage is by taking food till the time of Sahar. So basal insulin you may take at the time of iftar only. And other insulin pre-mix, you can take maximum dose at the iftar and 50% of otherwise evening dose at the time of Sahar. Yes, you can take insulin if it is necessary.
Dr. Zaman, there are two more questions that are directed towards you. One is that you were talking about taking fruits. So Pooja wanted to ask, what about chiku and mango? And Professor Akmal wants to know that is grapefruit forbidden for all the patients?
Chiku, mango, and other fruit. Okay, a very good question. First of all, don't take juice normally. If you want to take juice, because juice takes away all the beneficial fiber for which the fruit is very famous for. So if you want to take juice, then 50% juice plus 50% diluted, and then you can take only at the time of iftar 1 glass. Okay, now fruits are divided into two groups. One is juicy fruit, other is pulpy fruit. Now, if you take juice of any fruit, then if most of the time pulp comes, it is better because glycemic index is good. If you take a juice of any fruit and no fiber come out, all the juice come out, means it is not good because glycemic index is high. And I read one question about grapefruit. Grapefruit is very good fruit for diabetic particularly because glycemic index is only 36, very low. So you can take grapefruit safely, but not grapefruit juice.
Thank you very much. Next, I would like to request Professor Akmal Bhatti, if he's here. Sir, are you here?
Yes.
Achha, sir, my question towards you, thank you for joining us. Muhammad Vikas wants to know that if patient has multiple other comorbidities in addition to diabetes, but he's in the yellow categories, diabetes is controlled, like he has hypertension as well as ischemic heart disease, so will he still be in the yellow category, or addition of comorbidities make it a red category?
Thank you, Soumya. It will depend on the comorbidities that the patient has. If he is a mild diabetic, and along with that he has a single dose, takes only one medicine for control of blood pressure, I don't think that will make any big difference. But if there are significant comorbidities, and if the patient has to take quite a number of medicines, especially including diuretics also, then the category will definitely change to red.
Okay, thank you, sir. There is another one very, very important question. If a patient is fasting for the last 10 hours and he's dizzy or discomfort is there and he feels dryness in mouth, but his blood sugar levels are okay, more than 120 milligrams per deciliter, should he break the fast?
I think it will depend on the cause of why are the symptoms there. I think that patient has to be examined. I think if he has or she has significant symptoms, it will be better to break the fast, because you're not sure about the blood sugar levels, but they check properly or not. So the safer thing will be to break the fast and immediately seek medical attention.
And also because dizziness and discomfort could be due to other reasons other than hypoglycemia as well.
Yeah. So, but I don't think the patient should take risk of continuing with the fast, because if that patient has to take medical advice.
So may I want to say,
Yes, sir.
I think if this person is on SGLT2 inhibitor, it will be a good idea to check his ketones.
Yes, sir, because we know that non-ketotic coma is also one of the
euglycemic.
Yeah.
Soumya, I would like to respond.
Yes, sir.
Right. Regarding the comorbidities, Akmal did mention that if hypertension is well controlled, but I did mention in the comments as well. Those patients who are having a wide range of glucose variability, they may be in good control, but sometimes their sugar is 70 and sometimes their sugar is 300 or something. So this marked variability of glucose levels, which can happen in during Ramzan, increases the risk of acute cardiovascular events. And those patients, if they have comorbidity, that they have suffered a recent MI or recent PCI or something, or they are not well established, probably they should be refrained from fasting, or at least they should be very cautiously fasting. Another thing about very rightly pointed out by Aziz Saab, that in present day of medication, when we are using SGLT2 inhibitors, the patient may have a normal or near normal glucose level, but still be having ketoacidosis, and his symptoms may be, this is like a normoglycemic ketoacidosis. So that's one thing which probably should be considered. And I agree with Akmal that instead of putting your life at risk, the patient should probably break fast. It may be having these symptoms not because of hypoglycemia, but maybe because of some other cardiovascular events as well. So that would be my response.
Thank you very much, sir. One last question from Professor Khalid Mahmood Khan before we move on to the chair of today's session. Professor Khalid, the question is that if a person is taking long-acting insulin like Toujeo, should that be taken after dinner or at Sahri?
Unmute.
Sir, your mic is not on. Unmute, please.
Yeah. Can you listen to me now?
Yes, sir, we can.
Yeah. I think so. Long-acting insulin should be taken at iftar time, as Professor Azizur Rahman rightly said, and he has elaborated quite nicely. Because if we take in the morning, there may be chances of hypoglycemia mode, and it's better. And moreover, he has to see what level of his sugar. Like, is he falling in the category of hyperglycemia more than 300 or hypoglycemia less than 70? If in these two ranges, he should consult his doctor before fasting.
Okay, thank you very much. So would you like to add anything about our today's session?
One question is very important. I was listening that COVID patient, can he fast? There are three categories. I want to say that those who are 81% and they are having minimal disease and they have fully recovered, yes, they can fast, but after consultation with their physician. And those who are having severely ill disease like critical illness and they are more than 14%, those patients should not fast. So that is, and I must congratulate whole team as Professor Azizur Rahman nicely elaborated the dosage and everything. Similarly, risk factor elaboration by Professor Tariq Wasim, and wonderful elaboration about diet like dates ke hum 2 khajurein le sakte hain at the time of iftari. Thank you very much, Professor Zaman, because I was many a time people are asking, can we take dates? So you have told us that 10 dates, I think so 2 dates, you wonderful and elaborated nicely. Thank you very much. And lastly, Dr. Taj Jamshed, he also elaborated the risk factor. So I think so all of you have done wonderful. Thank you very much. And this thing, keep it up. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Generally एक वक्त में एक ही डेट सही रहती है.
ठीक है सर, एक
वक्त में एक ही डेट सही रहती है.
वैसे रोजा तो आधी खजूर से भी खुल जाता है, कोई बात
नहीं सर, वो आधी नहीं डेट.
So I tell my patients कि खजूर से रोजा खोलना है तो एक खजूर से भी खुल जाएगा, उसके लिए 5-6 खजूरें खानी जरूरी है.
नहीं सर, जो कह रहे हैं वो डेट की बात कर रहे हैं.
ठीक सर, I got it. Before I move on to our chair today, we have the opportunity of having Professor Shabeen Naz Masood with us, and since she has a lot of experience in gestational diabetes and diabetes in women, so I would like to pose one question to her. Madam, if you can ask, what are the recommendations for pregnant females for fasting? Dr. Shabeen?
Now, can you hear me?
Gigi, we can.
Gigi.
Thank you, Dr. Sovia. This was a really a good meeting and I enjoyed it a lot and learned also quite a lot of things. So I have few publications on Ramadan and diabetes regarding pregnant women. So the recommendations are for pregnant women is that if they are in the early pregnancy and are not suffering from nausea and vomiting, then they may fast. But as the pregnancy comes to term, when the fetal demands are too much on the maternal nutrients, then it's better not to fast. But you cannot just give a blanket statement to all women, because that way the compliance would not be good. So you have to, again, as previous speaker said, that you have to individualize advice. So the advice is that if they are in the 3rd trimester and if they can take Sehri well and they don't feel dehydrated, and if they are ready to break the fast, if they ever feel signs of hypoglycemia especially, so then they are allowed to fast. Another thing which is very important is the reluctance to test the blood sugar, because they think that with the pin prick to test the blood sugar, the fast may be broken. So there was a paper which was published in Diabetes Care. We published it, our group, and it was clearly said, and it is according to the Islamic injunctions as well, that doing a blood sugar does not break the fast. The important thing is, which I just wanted to say in few words, that the women, they think that the healthcare providers are not very well equipped with the knowledge. So what is important for all of us is to be well equipped with the knowledge. Obviously, the senior people, they do have knowledge, but they have to customize and they have to, I mean, according to the beliefs, according to the practices of the women. Now, one more question is that with us, with a high fertility rate, a woman keeps on getting pregnant and lactating. So that means that if she is married at 18 years and she has a pregnancy, then again she's lactating, again pregnancy. So that way, the number of fasts, if we ask them not to fast, then the number of months of number of days of fasting would be too much piled up. She'll not be able to redo it after the pregnancy is over or lactation is over. So in that case, she can have a test fasting for 3 days. And if she's good with that, she may continue fast. But the recommendation is, and the advice is that you cannot just have one say for every woman. That has to be individualized. And in the first trimester, if there's no nausea vomiting, she can fast. But in the last trimester, because of the increased fetal demands, she can take good sehri, then she may fast, and if she does not be dehydrated. So thank you very much, Dr. Soumya, for having me. And it was a real learning experience listening to these speakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Shabir. I would also like to ask Professor Mirza Akmal, because he's also joined us and he's been very actively participating in the group chat, if he would like to say anything about today's session. Professor Mirza Akmal, are you here, sir? Can you unmute Professor Mirza Akmal, please?
I am unmuting him, but he's not accepting actually. सर मैं प्रोफेसर आपको अनम्यूट कर रहा हूँ, इसको एक्सेप्ट कर लीजिएगा, यहाँ से अनम्यूट कर दिया मैंने आपको.
I just figured out it is his picture, it is not him.
Okay.
Okay.
But
Okay.
one question which basically I found, Dr. Soumya, there was a question which was first of all asked by Dr. Akmal, and later on there were comments and there were chat between Dr. Azizur Rahman as well, because he was very much concerned about the grapefruit juice. Probably these two people, they love it. He was basically telling us that basically juice leads to binding with P450, and that may affect. So I want to listen from Dr. Azizur Rahman whether he is true or not. Should the people who are basically having this diabetes mellitus, they have got great affliction for this juice, whether they continue taking her or not? Dr. Azizur Rahman, please.
Well, if it is myself, I would take it no matter what.
Okay.
But I think the only important medical consideration is that it should not be taken with high dose statins. And the reason is that grapefruit juice can increase your statin level. But in our country, mostly we give low dose, 10 milligram of atorvastatin, 20 milligram of atorvastatin. So that can be taken with the grapefruit juice. Or if you're taking high dose statin and you love grapefruit, I think you can take both at different timings. But I don't really think that there's any other significant interaction with any other drug.
Okay, thank you. We will form a grapefruit club soon. Professor Dr. Javed Akram, I think he has been very keenly listening to all of you. And before he gives his concluding remarks, I would like to ask one question, because we all know that he is very conscious about his fitness and diet, and he has been practicing intermittent fasting as well. So, sir, I wanted to ask that is intermittent fasting or fasting helpful to boost our immune system?
Thank you so much, Sumi, and thank you to all my dear friends and brothers. I hope everybody's safe. And excellent presentations. I think we all learned a lot, and I'm very grateful to all of the speakers, the panelists, and all the members, and Famivo as well for treat. It was music to our ears, and we all, I think, are much wiser now managing diabetes during Ramadan, especially with this pandemic, which is complicating our Ramadan, unfortunately. You are very right, Soumya. As you remember the presidential lecture that we discussed during our first flagship conference. Yes, it improves your polymorph or polymononuclear functions, the intermittent fasting, and also not only the quantity, the quality of immunoglobulins is enhanced after intermittent fasting, especially 18 by 6 hours eating window and 18 hours fasting window. And also, since it really also depends upon that what you are eating during your eating window. If you are, overstuffing yourself, you probably lose that immunity, because that immunity is mainly driven by decrease in fat in your liver. And that is compromised if you are eating too much in too short time, which we all do, unfortunately. And as Zaman very rightly said, that there is no concept of Ramadan without lal pila sharbat and without pakoda, samosa or dahi balla, which are all deep fried and fried in a very bad fat with all the trans fatty fats and everything. So I think there's nothing wrong with Ramadan. It's something wrong with our culture. Ramadan observed in other countries, it's very simple. You just take dinner at your iftar and you take breakfast at your seher. So there's no extra things. But unfortunately here we replace the lunch with very bad options. And that is just cultural. It's nothing to do with the religion and so on. But you are right that intermittent fasting does, people who practice intermittent fasting twice a week, like our Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam used to do, they have better immune system as compared, and there have been many studies. Regarding all these talks, I think Tariq did a lot of justice to his topic by triaging the diabetics who can fast or who can't fast. We formed a Ramadan study group, which is represented in 33 countries around the world. And we have been studying Ramadan. We started with diet-controlled diabetics, then we studied with oral hypoglycemic and diabetics, then we had insulin, then we had analogs. At that time, the analogs were not even present in Pakistan. But we had this multi-center study, and I happened to be the principal investigator. And then it was followed by many studies that we published in diabetology and so on. And then we also conducted a study in type 1 diabetics. And fortunately, all these studies clearly showed that although theoretically there is a risk, but we had to break the fast in less than 1% of the fasting diabetics. So most of the diabetics were taken through Ramadan. Obviously, the most important thing, and I think Aziza very rightly pointed out, is risk stratification. Pre-Ramadan stratification, which we never had the luxury this time because of this COVID pandemic. But otherwise, that is the most important consultation for me. 2 weeks to 1 month before the Ramadan, and we ask because Alhamdulillah, we are 95% of our patients are Muslims, and they wish to fast, and we should respect their wish as far as we can. We should not be deciding whether who will fast and who will not fast. We can only advise them that what is the risk to them, and then we should leave it to them for the informed consent whether they want to fast or they don't want to fast. And we should, I think we should rather tell them that what are the risks associated with the fasting and what is our opinion. And then it is because even if we forbid them from fasting, still many Muslims, they still prefer to fast. So, and also they don't want to be stigmatized. They feel handicapped if you forbid them to fast, and they go in depression. And again, there is number of studies to this effect. Just this month and last month, we published a study called Dia Ramadan study, which I presented in Busan, where most of my colleagues were there in Korea. And this study just showed that if you are using a sulfonylurea or whatever drug, and if you switch it from the morning to evening dose, and in this case we used, of course, in a multi-country, multi-fashion, and Abbas Raza was also one of the investigators with me, and we did not find any hypoglycemia during the whole month. In fact, there was zero hypoglycemia. That was very, very interesting. And the average dose of diamicron that we used, MR, was 1 to 2, 60 milligram. So what I'm saying is that it's a good option, and it was discussed very nicely by Aziz, that the switch from the morning to evening dose. And last year, we again did a study of, which was the first study on SGLT2 inhibitors. We use AMPHA, and we even use 25 milligrams. But again, because of the fear of euglycemic problems, we just switched it on the evening dose, and we did not see any euglycemic coma in these 300 plus patients. Me and Ali Java did that study, and again, these are just published this month. One in diabetesresearch.com, you can look at it, this study, and other one in Diabetes Care a couple of months ago. So the number of data is there now to suggest that I think we as Muslim physicians and dealing with the Muslim patients, our objective should be that if people are going to fast in any case, whether we consent them or not, or whether we offer them the alternatives, still our challenge is to take them safely through this month. And that's what I think most important thing is, and that is a challenge to us. And I think with the modern drugs available, it is possible. Sometimes I find it useful, and I saw in the question that I think overlooked it. The question is on the repaglinide. I have a very good experience that if the patients are
आपकी आवाज मेरे ख्याल स्टक कर गई है वीडियो उनकी, शायद इंटरनेट कनेक्शन की वजह से ही इज आउट राइट नाउ.
Okay, so in the meanwhile, if he reconnects, I would like to welcome Professor Qazi Masroor, and I also see Professor Farooq Iqbal and Dr. Afzal Chaudhary and Dr. Samiullah and Dr. Asma. They're all really valuable members and senior faculty of PSIM. So I welcome you all, and let's see if Professor Dr. Javed Akram can reconnect. He's back. Okay.
Did Dr. Javed?
Yes, I'm here, so I'll just finish and then we can. Okay, as I was saying that repaglinide is one good option, which gives you a very short acting. Yeah. As I was saying that repaglinide is a good thing, a good option, at least in our drugs that we have the option, because it is a very short acting and has very low chances of hyperglycemia. And if patient is not feeling up to mark or he doesn't want to eat much, the dose can be adjusted according to the intended meal intake. Another thing that I think Sabine also highlighted, that we took many times the fatwas from Jamiatul Azhar, Jamiatul Ashrafia in many of our studies, that testing of the blood sugar does not break your fast, and also injecting insulin does not break the fast. Because we did studies on insulin analogs which were better in managing diabetes during Ramadan than the human insulin. But the reason was that we thought there is a very little needle to meal time during Ramadan, because everybody wants to inject and eat immediately. They don't want to. So there was a mismatch between the peak insulin level and peak blood sugar level. So now what we have understood is that you can be injecting yourself 15 minutes or 20 minutes before the breaking of the fast, before the iftar. So you can have the simultaneous peaks, matching of the peaks as far as the insulin injection is concerned. So there is no need to switch to insulin analogs, which obviously are more expensive. However, we did those studies and the quality of life was better with the analogs. And after the Ramadan, people wanted to be on the analogs, and many of them who could afford were on analogs. I think again very nicely summarized by Zaman Sheikh about the diet, and I think very, very importantly, I think it's important also that what is apart from having emotional benefit and religious benefits, if you are looking for physical benefits during Ramadan, it depends upon your target. Are you targeting to lose 2 or 3 kilos of weight during this holy month? Are you looking at lower HbA1c in the subsequent months? However, we during Ramadan used fructosamine level, which obviously is giving you glucose control of 2 weeks or so, which is easily available and which can be used as a good tool just to motivate the patients. And usually what our studies, what we did, 15 days, one regimen, and after 15 days cross over to the other regimen, and similarly the other arm crossed over to the previous regimen was given up, and the new regimen was given to them. And we did fructosamine levels repeatedly. So that is another thing that I thought we can be discussing. But as Zaman said, it really depends upon what is your objective, what targets are there during your pre-Ramadan counseling that you set for your patients, and the patients accept them during the coming Ramadan, that how they are going to approach Ramadan, and what are we expecting at the end of the Ramadan, what will be done. So that will be important. And then again, I think Taj Jamshed's lecture was wonderful. Again, I think he emphasized upon the risk stratification that I said. Again, and I am at the end very grateful to all of you once again, especially Soumya and the FAMIVO and all my friends and colleagues, brothers. And I wish you all a very, very pleasant Ramadan, safe Ramadan with your family and beyond. By the way, we are bringing a special supplement of Biomedica, which is my university's journal, just dedicated to COVID-19. So any one of you want to write a review or meta-analysis, or has got a study, or want to write an editorial, you're most welcome to submit it to us, because we will be bringing it before Eid. And this is now becoming an impact factor journal. So please send me whatever you want to get it published, and we will try, because this is a special supplement where we are making sure that even if we get more papers, we will have more. The supplement will be more containing more pages rather than our traditional. So I hope everybody stays safe, and thank you so much.
Professor Javed Akram sir, there is a question for you. Dr. Mohammad Yaqub Awan wants a brief comment whether low dose statins have any role in risk prevention. Which risk prevention he did not mention?
I think it's a very good question. And of course, statins, unless there is a contraindication, must be given to every diabetic, and even to type 1 diabetic, even with normal cholesterol or triglyceride level, because it is not the quantity of cholesterol which matters, it's the quality, small dense LDL, which is much more atherogenic. So even we know that the events are reduction. And this is a very, very good study that we are doing right now, me and Shagufta Khalik, who is my head of the genetics department. And the study is about stratifying the patients, because we know that in diabetics, the maximum risk reduction starting from 4S and going to ASCOT, ALHART and other studies, 40%. So that means that after 5 years use of statin, 60% of people do not benefit. So what we are doing is we have identified 4 mutations in short arms 11 and 13, and couple of other mutations. And if this panel, we have got now a genetic panel, and if you do this panel beforehand, and if this panel is positive, do not use statin. You may use other alternative drugs, fibrates or whatever, but not because these are those 60% patients who will not benefit from statin. So in short, right now, till we get this patented until we publish more, until we explore more populations, because this is a Punjab-centric study, but we want to, other ethnic subgroups we want to include. Till we do that, I think the question is low dose statins, if well tolerated, should be given to all diabetics and also to all hypertensives, and also to all people who have got a vascular disease in the form of either cardiac bed or in the cerebral blood. So my option is yes, we must give them statin if they are well tolerated.
Okay, sir, thank you very much. I think we will conclude our session today because we are already very late. It's 13 minutes past 12. I would like to thank PharmEvo, especially Usman Saab and Sabir Saab, for coordinating this activity for us. I think it was a very useful session. And you can see from the number of participants, we had 100 plus participants, and still at midnight, we have around 60 participants with us. So thank you very much. I hope we continue to meet virtually on these Zoom meetings or team meetings or Google Hangouts, and we can all share our experiences of this staying at home and still practicing medicine with each one of us. And thank you very much everyone for being here. And thank you very much. Allah Hafiz and happy Ramadan.
एक अनाउंसमेंट है, जिन लोगों ने ये सेशन अगर मिस कर दिया है या लेट ज्वाइन किया, तो वी हैव लाइक PharmEvo यूट्यूब चैनल, तो ये उस पे भी अवेलेबल होगा, तो एनीवन कैन लिसन इट आउट. जो लोग थोड़ा लेट आए हैं, जिन्होंने सेशन थोड़ा लेट ज्वाइन किया, तो PharmEvo यूट्यूब चैनल पे ये तमाम रिकॉर्डिंग जो है इसी पूरे सेशन की जो है वो मौजूद होगी. Thank you very much on PharmEvo behalf, tamam panelists and speakers. Thank you very much to all of you, inshallah. And a special thanks to Dr. Soumya, जिनको हमने काफी डिस्टर्ब किया, तमाम speakers and panelists को जो है हम कोशिश करेंगे कि इंशाल्लाह इस तरह के सेशंस जो हैं वो फ्यूचर में कंडक्ट करते रहें. और बिकॉज हमारे पास नंबर ऑफ पार्टिसिपेंट्स, डॉक्टर्स के अलावा काफी जनरल पब्लिक के भी क्वेश्चंस आ रहे थे बीच में, वो हम देख रहे थे, तो एक इंफॉर्मेटिव सेशन रहा ओवरऑल. इंशाल्लाह विल ट्राई टू कीप इट अप, एंड इंशाल्लाह आप PSIM के साथ इंशाल्लाह हमारा कोलैबोरेशन जो है वो फ्यूचर में काफी फ्रूटफुल रहेगा. थैंक यू वेरी मच डॉक्टर सौम्या, एंड थैंक यू वेरी मच टू ऑल ऑफ यू. Allah Hafiz.
Thank you, Dr. Soumya. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you very much, all of you. Thank you. Thank you. Allah Hafiz.